Story 1. I work in a busy restaurant and say corner hundreds of times each night as I move through the kitchen. While running food to a table, I set it down gently and, in my sweetest customer service voice, said corner, while looking the customer in the eye instead of saying, "Here is your soup," like I usually do. They looked confused. My brain tried to reset, so I said thank you, as if that would make it better. I backed away. It was a lost cause. Story 2. A while ago, I was working the morning shift at McDonald's. I'm not a morning person. My brain wakes up around 10 a.m., and it was only about 8 a.m. I handed a woman her large coffee. The sun was shining in my eyes, so I said, "Praise the sun." She looked at me strangely and drove off. Story 3. I told my friend "you're welcome" after he sneezed and excused himself the other day. Story 4. I left the coffee machine running without a jug underneath. I went to take a shower and had to clean up the mess afterward. Story 5. I lifted my welding mask, forgot it was on my head, and went to get a new one. Story 6. I flipped my Kindle over to read the other side of the document. Story 7. I tore open a sugar packet, poured the sugar into my coffee, and tossed the empty paper packet into the trash. Story 8. I was a kitchen employee at Arby's when I was 18. We used to have foot-long sub rolls, but the only subs we sold were 6-inch, so you had to cut each roll in half before using it. I zoned out one day, cut a roll in half, put the knife back in the roll bag, and then tried to use the roll to cut the next sandwich. My manager saw it and died laughing. Story 9. I was trying to make some scrambled eggs. Basic prep. Crack the eggs, put them in a bowl, toss the shells. My mistake. I cracked an egg and put it in the trash. I stood over the trash can with the shell in my hand, processing what had happened for about 30 seconds. I had the faint feeling that I had messed up and wondered for too long exactly how it had happened. Story 10. Once my girlfriend was handed her drink at Starbucks. She thanked the barista, went to the counter to get cream, and immediately dropped the fresh drink into the trash can. Her mother and I looked at her and started laughing. The barista saw what happened, treated it as an everyday mistake, and agreed to replace the drink. We were the only customers there. We still bring it up now and then and all laugh, my girlfriend included. Story 11. I put my dirty plate in the freezer instead of the dishwasher. Story 12. I threw a bowl of cereal on my bed. God blessed me because even though it was Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I like to eat it dry. Story 13. I worked at a fast food restaurant, taking orders both inside and at the drive-thru. I took a customer's order at the counter and told them to pull forward to the second window. Story 14. I accidentally put a dog biscuit into the washing machine instead of a detergent pod, but I realized before turning it on and was able to recover it. Story 15. I drove 17 miles past my interstate exit before I snapped back to reality. Story 16. I waited at a stop sign for 5 minutes because I thought it was a red light. I was not on my phone and did not hold anyone else up. Story 17. I went inside the gas station, paid, then drove off twice. I did not even fill up. I just drove away. Story 18. My brother ordered nachos at a Mexican restaurant, grabbed a chip, and proceeded to watch himself dip it into his tea. After about 2 dips, he came back to reality, shook his head, and said, "What? My mother is an emergency medical technician. After a 24-hour shift, she came home and tried to unlock the front door with the button on her car key and did that for about 5 minutes. I once drove to work when I was supposed to drop my younger brother off at school. Neither of us noticed until we arrived at my workplace, and I had to turn around. He was late." Story 19. I got in my car on the weekend to go somewhere, went on autopilot, and realized it when I was pulling into my work parking lot. I thought, why the fuck did I drive to work? Story 20. I was holding my phone and an ice cream cone. When the phone rang, I held the ice cream to my ear. A sticky ear is surprisingly uncomfortable. Story 21. I used the key fob from my car to lock my refrigerator. I do not know why. Story 22. Put a used fork in the trash can instead of the dishwasher. I meant dishwasher, not washing machine. Story 23. I kept jamming my work key into my house door. My work key is a large silver key, and my house key is a picture key with a bunny on it. Story 24. I was brushing my teeth and went to throw something away, but I ended up spitting all over the floor. Story 25. I had a drink in my hand and dumped it out because I checked the time on my watch. Story 26. A couple of weeks ago, I drove to my old house instead of my current one. I hadn't lived there in over 5 years. I pulled into the driveway and, luckily, realized what I had done before I got out of the car. Story 27. I dislocated my knee and kicked a soccer ball that was coming toward me. Story 28. I was folding my freshly laundered bed linens while puttering around the house. Somehow I was folding a pillowcase and the next moment I could not find it anywhere. I searched my very small home. It was not in the folded pile, not in the closet, not in the bedroom, bathroom, or kitchen where I had been folding laundry. It still haunts me, and I am going to find that pillowcase even if it kills me. Update. I did not expect this to blow up. Oh my God. I am now even more determined to look for that pillowcase. I lost it last Wednesday. I am at my mother's house for the weekend, but will update when I get back home. It is definitely not in my hand, my other hand, the trash, or the fridge. My main suspects are the closet or within the fitted sheets, which means I have to refold them. There are 2 pillowcases of the same design, and it is making me crazier, thinking I imagine the other one. I was even searching holding the other pillowcase like it was a missing cat poster, laughing out loud. Also, I am not German. I am just learning the language. I used to have a cat, but I do not currently. Update 2. To anyone still interested, I have not found the pillowcase yet. I have checked everywhere. The linen closet, kitchen cabinets, bathroom cabinets, bedroom cabinets, the fridge, the bed, and the other pillows. I think I am losing my mind, or maybe I already lost it when I could not find that pillowcase in the first place. Story 29. I walked naked into my son's bedroom. I had just stepped out of the shower, and his bedroom was mine when I was a child. Story 30. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, then went through my morning routine on autopilot. After I drank my coffee, I realized it was only 3 a.m., and I would not be able to go back to sleep. Story 31. My brother used the washroom before bedtime, and it was my turn next. I wanted to brush, but we had just moved and everything was a mess, so I could not find the toothpaste. I asked my brother where he had kept it. When I still could not find it, he came to check and handed me a can of shaving cream. When I pointed it out, he said that explains why it tasted odd and that he had thought it was a different brand of toothpaste. My brother used shaving cream as toothpaste. Story 32. The number of times I have gone to the shop to buy something and left without picking up the item is too damn high. Story 33. I have a dog with fluffy white hair. Poodle-like. I was on the couch petting and talking to my dog for a good while when I saw my wife come down the stairs. Trailing behind her was my dog. I had been petting a Costco fuzzy white blanket the whole time. I wish I could say it only happened once. For those asking for pictures of my pup and the blanket, search for Denver Theater Dog on Instagram. Story 34. I picked a can of shaving foam instead of antiperspirant, sprayed it on my underarm, took it as a sign from the Almighty, and ended up shaving it. Story 35. I overshot an exit that I have used hundreds of times. I did not notice and ended up driving another 50 miles before realizing that I was way out of the city's boundaries. I still do not remember any of the in-between, just starting to drive and then realizing I had no idea where I was. Story 36. When I was a brand new mom on maternity leave, trying to juggle law school and a newborn, my sister-in-law had an emergency and had to leave her Boston Terrier with me. Even though he was very well behaved and had already met the baby, we kept them separated just in case. One morning, after my husband left for work, I picked the baby up from the bassinet and went downstairs to make coffee. My husband had forgotten something and came back to find me at the counter, brewing coffee, rocking a black and white dog in one arm while our son was still quietly sleeping in his bassinet upstairs. He took the day off work, and I went back to sleep. Story 37. My mom had taken my lunch out of the fridge so I would not forget it, but I forgot it once. While on autopilot, I put it back. Story 38. I learned the hard way that if you hold money in one hand and trash in the other, it is impossible to throw away the correct item. Story 39. My name is Joe. I worked in retail as a manager. I had a call on hold, and I had not had my caffeine yet. I picked up the phone and said, "Thank you for joining. How may I hold you?" Instead of, "Thank you for holding. How may I help you?" I pretended nothing had happened, thinking the customer was silent. It turned out the customer had one of those laughs where you cannot breathe right away. Story 40. My morning routine included drive-through breakfast at McDonald's back when they had a garbage can in the lane. Every morning I would get my breakfast, pull up, and throw away yesterday's bag in random trash. One day my superior intellect decided to simplify the process and toss the new breakfast into the trash. I realized it a moment too late and pulled around for try number 2. Story 41. One evening I was playing Europa Universalis and was immersed in the game. Suddenly I thought I could grab a beer, so I paused and went to the fridge, but there were none. Weird, I thought. I was almost sure I had at least 3 bottles there. I returned to the computer, and all 3 bottles stood unopened on my desk. Apparently I had the same thought 4 times. Each time I returned to the computer, I forgot about the beer and resumed playing, not remembering the incident. Story 42. I have had 2 incidents, both related to driving. 1. At the grocery store, I was pushing my cart down an aisle. When I turned left into another aisle, I reached for my turn signal. 2. At the end of class, as I stood to leave, I reached down to unbuckle my seatbelt. Thank you for the silver, kind stranger. And thanks to everyone for laughing at my mistake. Story 43. My coworker was bent between me and the fridge. I couldn't open the door without seeing her. I accidentally hit her in the head with the fridge door and apologized profusely. She had mocked me earlier for struggling to open a gallon of milk, so I guess my monkey brain got angry and took control. Story 44. I woke up, got dressed, packed my things for school, and started making breakfast. Suddenly my dad appeared in the kitchen and said, "It's 3 in the morning and it's Sunday. What the hell are you doing?" Story 45. I put pasta on the stove but forgot to add water. For half an hour I heard the crackling of burning pasta and thought, I wonder where this noise is coming from. The smell finally drove me to check. Story 46. I woke up and saw that the clock said 6 a.m. Work started at 5 p.m. I shot out of bed, threw on clothes, and sped to work. Something seemed off, but I was late and had no time for that. I walked past an area that was not running on my shift yet and thought, when did they start that? It started to dawn on me. When I reached my line, the day shift worker I relieved every day was there. She looked at me like I had 2 heads. It was 6 a.m. I did not have to work until 5 p.m. I sheepishly told the shift manager what happened, clocked out, and went back to bed. I worked at that company for 4 years after that, and until my last day my manager gave me a hard time about it. Story 47. I peed in the trash can. I wasn't even thinking. I got up, walked toward it, opened the lid thinking it was the toilet, and let it rip. By the time I realized, it was too late and I went through with it. The bag was waterproof after all. Story 48. I was the first car at a red light in town. The light at the next block turned green, so I hit the gas, but my light was still red. Story 49. I was trying to ask my friend something, so I called out Shane. He looked at me, and for some reason, instead of asking the question, I called his name 2 more times. He said, "You have already gotten my attention." Edit. Thank you for the silver, kind stranger. Story 50. All kinds of things happened when I first woke up, either in the bathroom or the kitchen. I put body wash in my hair instead of shampoo. I put shampoo on my body instead of body wash. I put hair gel on my toothbrush. I reapplied deodorant a few times because I could not remember if I had just done it. I put dry dog food in my cereal bowl and cereal in my dog's bowl. The worst was one time I opened a can of wet dog food and licked the lid. Story 51. Earlier today, I filled my electric kettle at the tap and then went to put it in the microwave. In my defense, I was about to make instant ramen and was only half focused on the task while thinking of other things. Story 52. I am not sure if this counts, but sometimes I am in a conversation and say what I need to say. When the other person responds, I have no idea what they are talking about because I cannot remember what I had said. It is very annoying and only happens when I am tired and on autopilot. Story 53. When I was about 19, my grandparents had a beach house in Biloxi, Mississippi. The condominium complex had a pool, and my mother took me there while the adults went gambling. When we arrived, a woman in her early 20s was swimming. I found myself staring. My mother kept talking, and I was only half listening. I began to take off my shirt, then panicked and stopped. I told my mother I needed to use the restroom, went back to the condo, and have remembered that embarrassing moment for years. Story 54. I drove my now fiancée to my ex-girlfriend's house to drop her off. Story 55. I was riding as a passenger in my car while my wife was driving. I was exhausted after work while we were carpooling, and we came to a stoplight. Turned green, but the car in front of us did not move for a few seconds. I tried to call the driver a jerk and tell my wife to honk, but I ended up shouting honk. Jerk. The look on my wife's face before she realized I was being absent-minded was priceless. It has become a joke between us because she started laughing loudly once I realized what I had done moments later, and I said, wait. No, that is not what I meant. Story 56. I was still half asleep one morning and picked up an aerosol can, thinking it was deodorant. Remembering I had made this mistake before, I checked to make sure it was not hairspray. Bleary-eyed, I looked closer. My brain registered spray, so I pressed down and sprayed myself in the face with hairspray. Story 57. I normally wear contacts, but sometimes I don't put them in on the weekends. Getting ready for bed on a Saturday, I put my contacts in, then lay down and realized I could see clearly. I felt like Peter Parker after he was first bitten by the spider. Story 58. Early this morning, I almost put mouthwash on my toothbrush, but I caught myself and said, nice try, brain. Then put it back. I then grabbed the toothpaste and squeezed some onto my palm. Edit. First gold and silver awards. Thanks, everyone. I'm glad my mistake could provide entertainment for you all. Story 59. I poured water from a kettle into my French press, let the coffee brew, poured it into a mug, added caramel syrup, carried it up 2 flights of stairs, took a sip and nearly spat it out, only then realizing I hadn't boiled the kettle. It was the most heartbreaking cup of coffee ever. Story 60. I poured a cup of water into the freezer and put the ice cream container in the sink. Story 61. I do so much dumb fucking stuff while on autopilot, and it doesn't help that I'm in that state more often than not. I have thrown away so many spoons and forks and had to dig through the trash to get them back. I have thrown away my phone instead of the trash more times than I care to mention. Where are my keys? Oh, that's right. They were in the fridge for some reason. I have even thrown away something I was eating. Once my phone was in the closet on the top shelf underneath a stack of papers. Story 62. I brushed my teeth with icy hot instead of toothpaste. Story 63. When I was in college, my parents and brother were gone for the weekend on a trip, and I had an exam on Monday, so I went home to study. After a couple of hours of studying, I was hungry and checked the fridge. I found some food but was not sure if my mom was saving it for when they got back. I decided to call her to confirm. I grabbed my cell phone and dialed our home number, since that was what I would normally call. I then heard the home phone ring, so I put down my cell phone to pick it up. I said hello a couple of times but did not hear anything, so I hung up. As I walked back to my cell phone, I realized what had just happened. Story 64. I ran across a busy 4-lane road to catch a bus. I did not look. I just saw that I was about to miss it and bolted. I did not even realize what I had done until I was sitting down and thought, wait, what did I just do? To this day, I do not know how I did not get hit. Story 65. Walking into my room from the kitchen with a cup of orange juice in one hand and my phone in the other. I meant to toss my phone onto the bed, but accidentally spilled the juice on it. I was so annoyed I did not bother to clean it up until the morning. I slept on the couch. Story 66. I opened the refrigerator to get milk. I took the carton out, scanned inside, concluded there was none left, put the carton back, and did not eat my cereal. Story 67. I came home from a long day of work and got in the shower. After a few moments, I realized I did not feel the water hitting my chest. I still had my bra on. Story 68. I accidentally broke into someone's apartment. I was walking home from work, reached my door, and my key did not work. Our locks are poor and that kind of thing happens sometimes. There was a loose window pane in the bottom corner of the door that could be removed from the outside so the door could be unlocked. I removed it, unlocked the door, walked upstairs into the living room, and saw two strangers. It turned out I had broken into the apartment I had moved out of 3 months earlier, and the new occupants were understandably concerned. I explained in a panic. Fortunately, they had seen my name on mail delivered there in the intervening months and were understanding. I apologized profusely, told them about the loose window pane, recommended that they keep the deadbolt engaged because it could not be reached through the window pane, and then left immediately. Story 69. I got lost walking to school, very lost. I could not backtrack to figure out how I had gotten lost. I eventually found a payphone which should help date the event and called my dad to pick me up. Describing where I was took longer than I care to admit. Me, hey Dad, I'm at a grocery store. Dad, why are you at a grocery store? Me, I got lost on the way to school. Could you come pick me up when you have a chance? I'm not really sure where I am. Dad, what grocery store are you at? Me, Kroger. Dad, there isn't a Kroger anywhere near your school. Which Kroger are you at? Me, I don't know. How would I find out? Dad, what road were you walking on? Me, I don't know, I got lost. Dad, please ask one of the employees where you are. This continued for a few minutes before I was able to tell my father where I was, which ended up being several miles from my school. I was in high school. It was a route I had walked many times before. I had been thinking about something and walked on autopilot for a long time before I realized I no longer recognized my surroundings. Story 70. I regularly wear mismatched socks, sometimes wear my shirt untucked, and occasionally walk into random rooms without realizing why. One time I threw my cat in the trash and only realized when I took out the garbage 4 hours later. The cat did not make a sound while inside, and after getting out it was sleeping in the bin and later jumped onto my bed. Story 71. I woke up too early and went to make coffee. 1. Boil the kettle. 2. Spoon coffee granules into the mug. 3. Open the bag of sugar and add a spoonful of sugar to the mug. 4. Pour boiling water into the mug. 5. Panic quietly. Story 72. I gently brushed my friend's knee because the fabric felt like my couch. She was wearing jeans. The second time, I knocked to get out of a room. Yes, I'm that polite. Story 73. I used to work in a thrift store. One of my jobs was pricing donations and taking them to the sales floor. I also did quality control of the donations, and I kept a garbage can immediately to my left for anything I did not think was in good enough condition to sell. One day I was at home doing the dishes. I was washing silverware, and one fork had a spot I could not get clean. I scrubbed it with the sponge for a minute, but the spot would not come off. My work habits took over and I thought, forget it, this one is garbage, and I tossed it to my left where the garbage can usually is at work. Except I was not at work. The sound of the fork sliding across the tile floor instead of going into a garbage can snapped me back to reality. I picked it up and kept scrubbing until I removed the spot. Story 74. I scooped some cookies and cream ice cream from a half-gallon container, placed the ice cream scoop in the freezer, and put the container, still about 3/4 full, in the dishwasher. Then I ran the dishwasher and went to bed. When I woke up, the ice cream had melted and drained out of the dishwasher. The cookie chunks had been flung around and baked onto the other dishes and the dishwasher walls. I soaked the dishes in the sink for a couple of hours. The cookie bits came off in the next dishwasher cycle, but it took over a week of heavy use to clean the inside of the dishwasher. Also, I did not get to eat the rest of the ice cream. Story 75. Once my dad sneezed and I said, "Good night." For months we said, "Bless you," instead of "Good night," and vice versa. Story 76. I checked my watch while sitting with a cup of coffee in my hand. I spilled it directly into my lap. I sat there for a moment, taking in my mistake before cleaning it up. Then I went to bed. Story 77. I asked a customer 5 times during the transaction whether they wanted a bag or a receipt, because I could not remember whether I had already asked. Story 78. On behalf of my grandmother. When I was a teacher, I always filled the car with petrol on the way home on Fridays at the same petrol station. One week I drove there, got out of the car, removed the petrol cap, and realized the station had been demolished. It was just piles of rubble. Oh, Grandma. Story 79. My job involves driving people frequently. Last week I woke up late and was rushing while groggy. I grabbed a soda from the fridge for a quick caffeine boost. I got in my car, picked up my client, opened the drink, and started to drink it. It turned out to be beer. I took a sip at 9:30 a.m., while a passenger with a disability sat in the front seat. Story 80. Several times I have placed the cereal box in the fridge and did not realize it until I could not get the milk jug to fit in the cereal drawer. Once, something happened that really scared me. I was putting toothpaste on my razor instead of my toothbrush. I am not sure why I snapped out of it, which is the scariest part. I really do not want that to happen again. Story 81. I hate to admit this, but I drove 15 miles out of my way. I was driving from Dallas to Austin. There is a big off-ramp you have to take to go toward Austin instead of San Antonio, and I missed it, so I kept driving to San Antonio. To clarify, I was paying attention to the road, just not to where it was heading. Story 82. I was at the tail end of 5 12-hour shifts and I was sick with the flu. My girlfriend came home with her mother. I made them each a cup of tea, but I left the tea bags in the cups. While sitting at the table, on autopilot I kissed my girlfriend's breast over her clothes before realizing her mother was there. I apologized profusely. The mother thought it was hilarious and never let me live it down. Story 83. When I was 12, I turned off the house electricity. I was half asleep and got up to go to the bathroom. For some reason I thought, oh, I forgot to turn off the bathroom light, and I went to the power box. Then I realized what I had done but panicked because I could not see the power box in the dark and I broke a vase. Story 84. I had just been discharged from the hospital after having my son and hadn't slept in 2 days. My husband took me to Walmart to buy supplies for our slightly premature baby. He pushed me in a wheelchair cart because I had stitches and wasn't supposed to walk around much. At that point, I felt a half step above being a vegetable. I ran into 4 people I knew. At one point, someone asked how I was doing, and I replied that I was wearing a diaper. Story 85. He asked how long the drive would take. 1.5 hours. Story 86. I ran a red light, as if I were at a 4-way stop. I pulled up to the light, a car passed, and then I turned. My light was red. There wasn't another car for about half a mile, thankfully. Halfway through the intersection, I realized what I had done. Story 87. One night after a 12-hour shift, I pulled into the driveway, held the brake, but didn't put the car in park and tried to remove the key from the ignition. I became very frustrated because the car had a mechanism that would not let me remove the key until it was in park. I realized what had happened, put the car in park, turned it off, opened the door, and tried to get out while I was still buckled in. It was a rough day. Story 88. Once I grabbed a sandwich, threw it in the garbage, and kept the napkin. Another time, I received a phone call while smoking. I answered with my right hand, brought the cigarette to my ear, and said hello. My parents went on vacation and I borrowed their car. When I returned, I opened it with the remote key, sat in the back seat, and only then realized I was supposed to drive. I felt dumb. Story 89. I sprayed deodorant in my hair, thinking it was hairspray. I didn't even realize it until someone pointed out the white mark. Story 90. I put milk in the coffee jar. I urinated without pulling down my pants. I ate a pen because a cinnamon stick stuck in my ear felt like one. I spat while wearing a mask. I put on the boots without wearing socks. Story 91. I had one of those pedal bins in the corner of the room. I was watching television and needed to urinate. I walked over, stepped on the pedal to open it, and my little fellow flopped out before I realized what I was doing. Story 92. I put a pizza in the oven and went back to watching television. When the timer went off, I went to get it, but the oven was empty. I searched the house thinking one of my friends was messing with me, but found nothing. Felt surreal, like I had taken drugs. Still hungry, I got another pizza, put it in the oven, and sat in the kitchen to watch it so it wouldn't disappear. I decided to grab a soda while I waited, and then I saw it. I had put the first pizza on the middle rack in the refrigerator. I felt like a complete moron. Story 93. My brain does not register space correctly on autopilot or how doors open. More than once I have pulled a door into my forehead while standing in front of it and trying to open it. Story 94. My girlfriend usually does the dishes, and she and I have a long-standing tradition of touching each other's buttocks. When she is washing dishes, I grab her butt, hug her from behind, and fondle her breast before I get something from the fridge. It started once when I was reaching into the fridge while she did the dishes. She liked it, so it became a tradition, and now I do it without thinking. Recently, we visited my mother for a week. I wasn't paying attention while grabbing a soda from the fridge and reached out before I realized it was my mother. She looked mortified. Explaining it to her was very awkward. Story 95. I drove 20 miles to my former job, which is a secure military base. Because I had quit and surrendered all of my badges, it was awkward at the gates. I had been away from that job for months. Story 96. Driving to the wrong town. After my now wife and I got engaged, we needed to drive back to her hometown that day. We were driving, talking, and happy. Then we looked around and realized we had driven to the wrong town. We knew because we had reached the ocean. We had simply missed our exit and were a solid 2 hours from our destination. We stayed in a hotel that night and returned the next day. When we later got married, we spent a night there on the way to our honeymoon. It was embarrassing to call her family and say we would be a day late because we missed an exit and did not notice for over an hour. I still do not think they believe it was an accident. Story 97. My morning alarm went off when I was about 14. I slapped my hand blindly onto the bedside table to hit the snooze button. No matter how many times I felt around, I couldn't find the alarm. I lazily craned my head and noticed it wasn't on the bedside table. It was still beeping after all. I dangled out of bed and searched the floor and under the bed. I found the power cable and followed it into my covers. Puzzled, I pulled back the covers slowly, like the scene in The Godfather with the racehorse head, and discovered I had been cuddling the alarm. To this day, I have no idea why I reached out, took the alarm off the bedside table, and cuddled it in my sleep. Story 98. I drove home after work one night. I was about to open the gate when I noticed an unfamiliar dog. I realized I had driven on autopilot to my childhood home an hour away, and my parents no longer lived there, though they still owned the house. Story 99. I drove 25 minutes toward my workplace when I was supposed to go to the grocery store. Instead of going to the store 10 minutes from my house, I went to the one 40 minutes away. Story 100. My wife recently went downstairs to fill her glass from the refrigerator. Instead of turning on the light and then filling her glass, she tried to get water from the light switch. Story 101. Well, I cannot remember one of my own right now, but my brother once put milk in the Nutella glass. Story 102. I had my father drive me to school on a holiday. The best part was that I had not even taken my bag. I was zoned out until the guard near the school asked what I was doing there in my uniform. Story 103. I went to look out my window to see if I was inside the lines of a parking space, and with the window up, I smacked my head against the glass. Story 104. I made a fresh bottle of hot black coffee for my newborn son. I realized, as I was carrying it to him, that it began to scald my hand. Story 105. When I was in high school, I fell asleep in the middle of class. When the teacher said my name, I woke up and said the number 4. It was the dumbest thing I ever did. Story 106. I tried to use my spoon as a straw to drink my ice cream twice in front of my new boyfriend. We have been together a year now. Story 107. I left the convenience store and went to my car. I opened the door and started to get into the driver's seat before realizing a woman was sitting there. It was not my car. Although it looked similar, it was a different model and color. The woman was terrified. I apologized, but she just gestured for me to go away. I expected the police to arrive, but they never did. Story 108. I lit a match and brought it to my mouth, even though there wasn't a cigarette. Story 109. I left the television remote in the refrigerator and then looked for it for 30 minutes. Story 110. My dad was at my grandma's house, but she was not home. He wanted to make coffee, but there were no beans in the machine. He found a box labeled coffee and put the beans in the machine. He made a cup of coffee, but it tasted strange. My grandma keeps dog food in that box. Story 111. I had a fuzzy purse that I hung on a chair while I ate. It rubbed against my leg when I reached for something, so I started petting it, thinking it was my cat. Story 112. I peed in the sink and tried to wash my hands in the toilet. My brain's emergency services flipped on just as I was reaching into the bowl. In my defense, I hadn't slept for 32 hours. Story 113. I am sitting on the toilet. I am holding the roll of toilet paper in one hand and unwinding it with the other. I wiped myself with my non-dominant hand and then tossed the roll in my other hand into the toilet. Story 114. I went into the garage to switch the laundry, and I flipped the lock on my way out as if I were leaving. I had to text my boyfriend to let me back in. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.